Welcome everyone to Loot Town Square number, is it 10? No, 11? Say Loot Town Square number 11. It's going to be a short one today. We have two topics on the agenda. We have Jason Meyer and Lunar Mayer here to tell us about their new project Levee that launched last week. And kind of how that relates to Loot Exchange and the Lootverse. And then we'll go to Sportsbeard, and Sportsbeard's going to give us a quick update on the Crypt. He's going to talk about their Relic NFT competition, announce the shortlist, and then he'll recap Chapter 1 that was completed last week in, I think, like 15 minutes. So pretty exciting. With that, let's just get right into it. Jason, what's up?
Hey everyone. Thanks, Andrew, for the intro. Great to see everyone here. Yeah, so what we want to do today is two things. So I'm going to pass the mic and the screen share over to Michael in just a second, and he's going to do is just walk you through our new product and kind of show you how it relates to Loot, and in the process kind of give you a quick sense about like behind the scenes of what's going on and like why this new product is related to Loot and sort of the reservoir protocol and how that's all working. And then I think what we want to do really briefly is just touch on what we see as kind of like a cool potential Loot community experiment that we might be able to run based on some of the new things that we've built with this product. So I think with that, Mike, if you're ready, maybe we'll have you just share the screen and kind of walk through Levee sort of on the Loot page, and we can talk about what's going on there.
Sure, that sounds good. You can hear me all right?
Yep.
Good. Okay, let me just share my screen. You should be able to see, can everyone see Levee at this point?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, cool. So Levee kind of started with this concept of, NFT bidding is kind of challenging to do, and we're building on top of the reservoir protocol for Loot Exchange, and so we tried to think about, as an experiment, like what would a marketplace look like if it was entirely centered around these kind of attribute slices, we call them. So I think it's really easy to see when you look at, some of the more visual collections. So for us, like a slice might be, this blue check face or blue beard. And one of the novel things that we're able to do with these slices is actually create bids on particular attributes, and entire collections. Looks Rare started doing this, but we kind of took it one step further and started focusing on particular slices. I think we were inspired by like all the sub communities within Loot that centered around like the initial divine robes, and so you could come in and place a bid for exactly the like type of token that you wanted. So I'll jump into Loot here. So yeah, here's some kind of similar slices for Loot. You can see that these are kind of the top bidded slices in Loot. So right now there's a 2.3 ETH bid on crowns, or a little bit less legendary. And so in a way, like the willingness that people have to pay for these different slices kind of determines the value in comparison to each other. So there's not like a ton of data, but we are kind of imagining that as more people bid, these attributes will start to like reveal themselves, and you'll get to see like what is highly sought after in a collection. And I think there's a bunch of interesting implications here. I mean, I think you get some more distinct entry points into these different slices. Like, say you wanted to get a bag with Divine, like now there's kind of like a bid floor of 2.1 versus like the overall bid floor. So you can have more confidence that you're like entering into this particular slice and have some like fallback liquidity. So I think it's going to create more confidence in people entering to the different parts of a collection that they're interested in. So that kind of like talks to the flip side, which is that, you know, now that there's all this liquidity, you could come in at any point, like come in and sell instantly for the highest bid available. And since people can kind of bid across collections, it's much more easy for people to provide this kind of liquidity. Before, you needed to basically like go through every single bag and bid on it, or, you know, like you basically had to be a bot to like make a market for any particular collection. And I think how it ties into Loot is like, okay, now you have all this multi-tiered liquidity for the Loot collection. And so you can imagine that you're coming in to Loot, and one of the magic things about the fact that these things are both built on Reservoir is they share the same order book, they have the same liquidity, like they're basically part of the one big pool of liquidity that Reservoir is set up. So what we want to do is start to bring this liquidity into Loot Exchange, where you could, you know, instantly sell from here, you know, set up attribute and collection-wide bids. I think like it's cool to be able to have like very particular focuses with these different marketplaces. Like you can have a Loot Exchange, which is like very, very like tightly wound to all the different intricacies of loot, and you try to treat it in a way that really highlights the bags as much as possible. And then you can have a site like Levee where it's focused on, you know, what's the best way to create these bids, and what's the best way to like manage the bids and manage how you're providing liquidity. And that's just possible because they're all basically built on, you know, the same thing. So pretty excited to like explore how these can, you know, come together a little bit more, have their own purposes and synergies. There's a lot like left to do on both, but we're pretty excited about kind of each direction. Anything else?
I think that was great. Before we kind of jump into this idea for an experiment, does anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts?
I think this is awesome. Did I see you have a Genesis Mana collection already up there too?
Yeah.
So there's a Genesis Mana collection, and one of the things that we think is super interesting about Mana, like clearly there aren't a lot of bids there, but you know, when you have a Genesis pool like on NFTX, like that's a great way to be able to know what you can sell your Mana for or what you can buy one for. You don't get that differentiation, right? Like here with the Genesis Mana, you can kind of imagine people becoming more or less interested in one of the particular orders and sort of needing to have one particular one, and you get this kind of like competition and identity forming around the particular orders, which I think is super cool. So I think, this particular use case of something where you kind of have this like a little bit more fungibility in the token might be one that might work extremely well in a site like Levee.
Yeah, that one about mana is really interesting because we do have a channel inside the Genesis Project Discord that pops up anytime a new piece of Genesis mana is added to the NFTX pool. And there are a couple people who just troll that channel. And anytime there's like high item ranking mana or a mythic rare one or something, it's like immediately purchased out of the pool. But obviously done manually and done with probably more gas than is necessary. It sounds like what you're saying is they can almost set up a rule just to be like, hey, here, I'm willing to buy all of these as long as they fit a certain criteria up at a certain price, and just sort of set it and forget it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there, what you get is like both a win for the buyer and the seller because you don't have this kind of like pool fee. Also, what I think you reveal, which is so interesting, is the actual value of that particular trait. And so it might be the case, like you really want to know not only which, that somebody might be trolling for a particular order type, but actually how much more is that order type worth than the other ones? When you have the top bid, then you kind of get this indicator of what that value is.
Exactly. Yeah, this is great. I really like this.
Other thoughts, ideas?
I have a really tactical. No, go ahead, Luke. Here.
How customizable are those slices?
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now, the slices are only organized at the level of the attributes of the underlying NFT, but we're actually working on making the slices completely customizable, which would allow you to basically go in and place a bid. Like you could go and you could even potentially pick different NFTs from different collections and place one bid on like a custom slice.
Yeah, it's kind of arbitrary right now. Like we set up like the best we could, like initial attribute slices, but you can totally imagine, emergent slices where people find a set that they are passionate about, and we've even talked about like how could we facilitate some of this more like community energy around particular slices of NFTs. Like, could there be commentary or social aspects to it? I think there's a lot of interesting implications of this kind of grouping where like your traditional marketplace focuses very heavily on like individual tokens or entire collections. So we're trying to like explore different ways that this kind of organization could manifest itself.
And we're right now we have these particular slices, and we're thinking about how to make them kind of customizable from the sense that anybody could come in and make their own slice. But because we have some, ability to do things manually, like if there's a loot slice that we didn't get that you think would be particularly cool, or like something that, you want to combine these things in a particular way because it makes a lot of sense for a sub-community in Loot, that's something that we could potentially do manually to try to like see exactly how that works for people.
Yeah, a few that come to mind for me for Loot, both as something we could set up statically or use as a test case for community-driven slices, would be focusing on the item rankings. So if a bag, for example, has 4 or more top-ranked items, that's of interest to me. And then also with the greatness scores, right? If you have a bag that the total greatness is above a certain ratio, that would be of particular interest to me. So those would be the ideas that come to mind.
That's awesome.
I'm a loot geek, just like Loot Hero here, and I always troll maybe once a week just to see if any of those full character bags have popped up onto the marketplace, either NFTX or OpenSea. So that'd be another cool community-created slice. I think there's only 27 of them, if I recall correctly, but bags where it's like all mage items, all hunter items, or all warrior items.
Yeah, I'd love to get one of those bags.
And I think, one of the cool things about this is like you could imagine having, Ken goes and makes bids on this slice of full characters. And there's just somebody that has a bag that has that, and they don't really know that much about the loot community. Maybe they bought them early, they have a bunch of bags, they're not really paying that much attention. And then when they go to the reservoir sites, they just already get the sell liquidity from Tim's bid.
Oh wow! So it detects that on the site. We just let them know that hey, you have a bid for 5 ETH or whatever the top bid is based on their bag.
Yeah, exactly. They wouldn't even know that it was from Tim. It would just say next to their bag in their portfolio, it would say sell instantly, and it would have the bid associated, the best bid that anybody's made on that token, regardless of which slice they made that bid on.
Wow.
Man, this makes me think you need to implement message in a bottle here somehow. Make it so that if you have an item in an NFT collection where somebody's making a bid that's like 100% above the floor or something, you get some sort of call to action out there, because most people wouldn't have heard of this. But something that's like, hey, FYI, there's something happening here for you.
Yeah, it's definitely like this network effect problem to some extent too, right? Like people are just on OpenSea or wherever, and they don't know about this. But the cool thing is, like, because of the way Reservoir is set up, the idea I think here in the longer term is that this liquidity gets integrated in many places. So you could imagine that this liquidity just gets implemented in a wallet application. So then when you open your wallet, next to every one of your NFTs, it just says sell instantly, and it's going into the Reservoir protocol, finding the best bid and just implementing that exchange. And so the idea is that you don't necessarily need to be on Loot Exchange. You could just have a Loot token and open up whatever wallet app you use, and if they were integrating Reservoir, then you could just that bid.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys are dialed in. I mean, when token.
Yeah. Well, okay, so actually, speaking of that, there's one thing that I wanted to have Michael back up, show, if that's cool, Mike, which is the bidders page, the top bidders page.
Oh, yeah,
and
sure.
I think this is going to give you guys a sense about where we're thinking the Loot community might be able to do something kind of cool. So, we have this idea of top bidders, right?
The Loot one or the top one?
I think this one's fine for now, right? Okay. So we have this idea of a top bid on every single token. And because the tokens are broken down by attributes, you can have different people that are top bidders on different tokens, right? So you can see here right now, GhostShipETH.eth wallet is the top bidder on approximately 6,000 of the Loot tokens. And then this wallet below this is bidding on some attribute slices with bids higher than the collection-wide bid floor, and is able to collect the top bid on about 2,000 tokens, right? Now, these people you can think of as providing liquidity to the Loot community, meaning that what they're doing is they're providing exit liquidity for anybody in the community that wants to sell their token. And one of the things that we're doing on the back end here is we're actually tracking how much liquidity wallets are providing to a specific community. So we know that this person GhostShip is currently providing 11,000 ETH worth of liquidity using only 2.25 ETH, right? Because this bid of 2.25 ETH, it's being applied to 6,000 tokens, meaning that they're providing this large amount of liquidity for exiting a position on a Loot NFT. And one of the things that we're really interested in is the fact that because we're actually monitoring this, we're able to think about the value of incentivizing liquidity provision on a particular collection. And so as a member of the Loot community, I really care about my ability to potentially exit Loot. Now, you have something like an NFTX pool. What the NFTX pool does is it restricts everybody's exit to the floor exit. So somebody that has a bag with 2 divine items in it has to exit the Loot community at the floor price. You could go and list their item and wait for somebody to pick it up, but if they wanted to exit immediately, would have to exit with floor liquidity. That's actually not the case here, right? Because somebody has bid on divine items, the person exiting the position with a divine bag is able to actually exit at a higher price. Now, this means that there's some inherent value for our community in having liquidity provision, and I think there's a bunch of other potentials here. So I'm gonna, Mike, if you stop sharing, I can pull up something that I've sort of just very briefly written up.
Sure.
One of the things that we've been talking about is the possibility. Can you all see this doc here?
Yeah.
You can see it. Okay. So one of the things we've been talking about, and to be completely frank, nobody's ever really done this before, so this is why we're framing this as an experiment, but we think maybe community members are crazy enough to try it out with us. Is the idea that you could pretty simply, in the context of Levee, provide incentives for liquidity provision. So what you could do, just sort of basically, is give people rewards for being the top bidders on each loot bag. Because what you're doing is you're essentially giving people a reward for being the exit liquidity or anybody that's in the loot community. Okay, so just a couple things. Like, there's different ways that you can provide these incentives, so we'll get to that in a second, but let's just talk about the process. So you could do something, and again, this is like completely been to revision. We just kind of wanted to put something together to get people's ideating around this, so, feel free to have any comments, but we're imagining doing a kind of short experiment, like 1 month or 2 months maybe, where the Loot DAO or maybe community members provide incentives for liquidity for loot bags. So let's just take this as an example, and we can talk about how you might specifically do this, but imagine the case that we use something like a little bit of ETH or A gold, essentially give people a reward for providing liquidity. And by that I mean we give a little bit of a reward to the top bidder on each bag. I think that this does 3 really important things that are valuable to the loot community. First is it supports community members or people outside of the community that want to increase their holdings of loot. So you're giving an incentive to people that really want to enter the community. Okay. The second thing, and I think that this is like an underappreciated potential here, is what you do is you increase the ability to actually value individual items within a bag. You incentivize valuation, meaning how much more is a pair of divine boots really worth than a katana. It does this by creating market strength across the breadth of loot bags from floor to ceiling. So rather than only providing liquidity at the floor, you start to actually provide demand across the entire set of bags. And it's unopinionated because you're giving people rewards only if they're willing to make a bid on a particular attribute. That means that they have to also be willing to pick up that attribute, right, in case somebody accepts their bid. And then the last thing that this does is it actually provides instant liquidity for loot bags. So if somebody wants to exit the community, they're going to be able to do that more easily. Now, you might think that this isn't a good thing, but I would make the argument that actually, as a community of people that really believe in loot, it's in our best interest to get people that have a low valuation of loot to exit. Because what we want to do is bring people into the community that really believe in the vision. And one way to do that is to help people that are on the lower end of the valuation spectrum to exit. Okay. A couple notes, and then maybe we can have a bit of a discussion. So first is that you wouldn't necessarily need to incentivize this with treasury funds, like using A gold or ETH or something like that. I think there's an interesting possibility of coming together to create a loot native asset that is like useful for people in the loot ecosystem and incentivize with that. So you can imagine creating an NFT that gives people like a merchant status in loot, and it might not be that useful for somebody that wants to come and just like mine liquidity, but if you were really into loot, you might want to collect sort of these merchant NFTs because they could be used in a particular way within the ecosystem. Okay, now, I think there's a follow-up question about sort of the long-term viability of an experiment like this, right? Because in some senses, you're just providing incentives and it's not clear how you're getting any, sort of self-propagation there. One thing that we've been thinking about is potentially using a marketplace fee on Loot Exchange to incentivize this type of liquidity. So you could essentially have the same fee that something like OpenSea has, but instead of using it in a way where it's just going to the OpenSea builders, you could take that, say 2.5%, and reallocate it to all the liquidity providers that are in the system. This might seem like it might not be a very big incentive, but I think the important thing to remember is that it's very unlikely that you're the top bidder on just one bag. If you bid on a slice that has 100 bags in it, and you start to add up these benefits. So as an example, just to sort of give you a sense about the scale of this, if we were able to capture all of the transactions that are happening on OpenSea, which I think is unlikely, but just to give you a sense of scale, you would be able to capture about 1 ETH in fees a day, which corresponds to being able to provide liquidity providers with about $50 a day, if they're bidding on about 100 bags. Now, if you have the floor bid, and you're bidding on 1,000 bags, start to make a lot more money, right? And so I think, you can actually imagine this thing kind of self-propagating without needing to be topped off with community funds. Anyway, this is just sort of food for thought, something we've been thinking about. We haven't worked out all the wrinkles at all, but we just wanted to give people a sense about like where our heads are at and maybe spur some conversation about this possibility.
Seems super cool, and I like anything that adds more liquidity to NFTs. One quick question: when you're talking about like rewards for top bidders, would that reward, always have to be less than the protocol fee to prevent someone from like selling to themselves and extracting rewards?
Less than the protocol fee.
Like if I was getting rewarded as the top bidder and then I purchased with a different wallet, or I was selling and then I purchased my thing and got a reward for that purchase, and I was just going through two wallets. I was just thinking about how like people could game it to try to like extract the rewards.
Yeah, so there's a few things to do here. So, and I totally agree. There are some like potentials for this. So we've been thinking about this a lot. Now, I think there's a couple things to notice. First is as soon as your bid gets accepted, you're no longer the top bidder. And so the rewards are given to bids that are made but not fulfilled. Okay, so you basically want a bid that is, if you're just trying to get rewards and you don't care about the bag, you just want to make a bid that's highest bid but have it not be accepted. Now, somebody that wants the bag would be incentivized to bid more than you. In terms of this problem about sort of this incentive compatibility problem, the reason, or sort of the way that we solve this is you're only able to capture rewards for bidding on slices, not individual tokens. And so I think the problem that you're alluding to is like, let's say I own bag number 10, I could bid 50,000 ETH on it, never accept the offer and get all the rewards. But because you have to bid on an attribute, the idea is that there's a sufficient number of people that could accept this bid that you are basically disincentivized from making a bid that's so high that someone might just accept it. Right? So we're trying to reveal the true value of attributes, not necessarily just reward people for individual bids on specific tokens.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes it a lot harder, to the point of maybe being impossible to game. Thanks for explaining.
Yeah, sure.
So it looks like this is already live. So like how much of this is functionalities here today, people could be using it, and how much of this is coming soon?
Yes, so right now, all of the bidding is live. You can go and make bids and accept bids on Levee. So all of that is completely available. There's a few things that we're still in the process of integrating back into Loot Exchange, right? So the instant liquidity isn't yet on Loot Exchange, though it's on our short list. And sort of the process, the thing that we're working on now too is kind of the process by which you would reward liquidity providers, right? So I think, sort of in the trustless nature of Web3, one way that you can imagine doing this is like sending a certain amount of rewards to a contract that is in charge of allocating those rewards. So we're sort of in the process of thinking about exactly how to do that. It's on, I would say we would be able to implement a full reward system for Loot liquidity provision within a couple weeks.
Okay, wow, great, yeah. When did this launch originally, Levee?
Last week. It launched like right alongside the Reservoir protocol, which if anybody hasn't checked that out yet, I think, Levee and Loot Exchange are just a couple of the uses that Reservoir is providing. Highly recommend looking into it. I think, the elevator pitch is to kind of unstack the typically vertical marketplace into an open source sort of Web3 native order book and the ability to easily plug in, regardless of which side of the order book you live on, sort of the bids or the sells. So we're super excited about the protocol, and think there may be some possible advantages to like trying this out in the early term if think that like this protocol might be useful moving forward.
All right, great. Yeah, I see this the same way you do. This seems like a massive leap in performance for the NFT market, for all sides. So yeah, I'll definitely be looking more into this and participating.
Appreciate it. Yeah, if you have any other thoughts, we'd love to chat.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does the person have to commit the liquidity? Like an example you showed, 2.5 ETH. Does it get staked?
Doesn't get staked, though you have to rack the ETH. One of the big advantages here of this protocol is, one of the sort of classic problems on OpenSea or on LooksRare is make a bid for 2 ETH, and then as a seller, they come along to accept the bid, and the person has moved WETH, and as a result, that bid is no longer active. We do here in conjunction with Reservoir is essentially as soon as you move the WETH, you no longer are the top bidder on that token. And so it's true that to be the top bidder, you have to have the funds available in your wallet. You actually don't have to stake them anywhere. It's just if you were to move them, you would no longer be matched with the seller. It's equivalent to no longer being the top bidder on that token.
I see. Cool. Yeah, I was thinking in terms of incentivizing the liquidity providers. The first thing that came to my mind was if you had considered people placing the funds there and collecting yield on it. That way, it could provide liquidity.
Not sure I fully understand. Do you mean just people kind of coming in and harvesting the incentives for liquidity provision?
Well, it might not make sense to discuss this with so many people on the call, so we can talk about it later.
Yeah, feel free to reach out offline. We'd love to, not on the call, probably still online, but feel free to reach out if anybody's interested in chatting about this offline on either side, Loot Exchange, Levee, Reservoir.
Jason, where should... Oh, go ahead.
One additional comment, just for anybody in the Genesis project community. I mean, with the slices they already have set up for Greatness 20, Greatness 19, and even Greatness 18, I mean, it's almost double the NFTX current price. So for like whoever dumped a number of Greatness 20 and 19 mana items into the pool yesterday or early this morning, I mean, had they known that these slices existed, the top bid is over double what NFTX gave them. So, yeah, clearly already real-world use cases for, increasing, both sides of the NFT marketplace and benefiting both sides. Great.
Hey, Jason, do you want people like giving feedback on this proposal in Loot Exchange, in the Loot Exchange channel, or just reaching out directly?
I think that's a great point, Andrew. I think what I'll do is maybe touch this up with some of the feedback that we've gotten here, and then post it in the Loot Exchange channel. We'd love to just get comments from people, ideas, and yeah, just start a conversation. Obviously, no pressure either way. We just thought it might be something kind of cool to get the community to think about. So would love any insights at all.
Yeah, and any feedback you have on the site itself, like we're kind of 1 week into it, so if you have like experience feedback or like whatever it is, it's really invaluable at this point. So.
And we've been doing a series of user experience interviews this week, so if anybody's got like an extra 30 minutes and they want us to poke and prod them and ask them questions, we would absolutely love to see some people use it and get our just sort of get our hands on people touching the site and get a sense about what works and what doesn't.
Well, awesome. Exciting stuff, guys. Thanks for coming on and sharing.
Yeah, of course.
And sharing works in progress too. I mean, this is a clear example of this idea of building together. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Incredible stuff, guys. I'm so impressed with your range. From love letters across the blockchain to Loot Exchange to this to game developments. I'm so impressed.
Yeah, we just like to build stuff, We're in the right place, I think.
It's definitely true. Well, we'll pass the mic back, and anybody feel free to reach out whenever you want.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right. Sportsbeard, you're up. Let's talk about the Crypt.
Hey, thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having us on again. It's good to be here. Got a big update from us this week. All the action happened last week, and now we're kind of in another cycle of developing the next chapter. But got a couple of things I can show if I just share my screen. Okay. I don't know.
I can see it.
See the Crypt. Okay. So yeah, just a reminder or first look maybe for some here. But this is our game, the Crypt, which is a game in the Lootverse. We went live last week, or just last Thursday, so still not quite a week ago. And it's a dungeon game where OG loot holders can come and raid our dungeons to win these relics, which is these skulls and crowns and medals and keys. You can see it at the top of the screen. We thought the game might stay up for a week or so as people came and had a look and decided whether they wanted to raid or not. But all 16 of our dungeons were conquered within 15 minutes, and all the relics were won. And what that meant, so this was the winning dungeon, the one that got defeated first, the Dungeon of Perfection. And these are the 12 winning loot bags that defeated that dungeon, and they all won a gold skull. And because it's from the Dungeon of Perfection, those NFTs of that order stacked into them, so they won gold skulls of perfection. And what can I show? So
Hey, Sportsbeard, on that dungeon right there.
Yeah.
I want to point out how awesome it was. I was part of the party that raided this one, and because you guys published what was going to be in the dungeon ahead of time, that orc, needed the strongest warrior weapon, the warhammer, to take it down. So when you look down the list of the raiders, it's pretty epic that within like 3 blocks, I think it's like Son of Wolf and 2 other people. I mean, there's exactly 3 warhammers, but when you look at the block timestamp, it's like the dungeon opened, the orc standing there, and then 3 warhammers immediately just took it out. And so like the play-by-play here is pretty epic too. I've been trying to go through each dungeon and kind of write up a little bit of lore about how the actual raid went down, but it's really cool that you guys listed it all out like this as like a recap.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I hadn't looked that closely at the raid order, so looking at the order of the blocks and when they came in, and from an observer, it was all quite instant. Yeah, to see those three Warhammers coming in, see Luke 2004, number 321, and 5040. All took a piece of the orcs and took them out. But yeah, it's great, and that was kind of it was great that you and some others had that experience of picking their loot to match the dungeon and forming a raiding party and going ahead and raiding. So we want to try and design into the future that to be available to more players and over a long period of time. But it was a great first experience, and I'd love to see any results you've got of writing the stories of the raids. That'd be great. I mean, I was just going to show next that we've got some sort of very high level stats looking, various things about the website and on chain stats as well, and just as a quick example, showing that all of the Chapter 1 dungeons were raided with 161 raids, and that was with 56 different raiders. I mean, the majority had single loot bags raiding, but you can see there's quite a long tail of individuals with a lot of bags. But all in all, there was a total of 161, which was less than we anticipated. I think we underestimated the amount of prior picking of big hitting loots. Like the average we thought would have been more like 250, something like that. So that's it's interesting to see that. We want to kind of future chapters have more people being able to raid, and so there's things for us to look at. But if they can turn into a followable story of what that raid happened, that would also be great. So yes, we've got so there was 672 relics were won so far. This is our relic NFT collection on OpenSea, and 528 of them have been claimed. So some people are holding off before clicking the claim button, which is fine. They're kind of theirs to claim forever, which I think is interesting. It's like it's there in the dungeon. If they choose to go and pay the gas to claim their relics, they can. And it's good to see a lot of people have already done that. Part of what's next for us is working out, how we incentivize people to own, trade, want more of these relics, and we've got plenty of ideas of how they'll have utility in future chapters of the Crypt, but they might also have utility in kind of trading games or burn mechanics, or lots of ideas. At the moment, we're concentrating on more of the game experience to distribute more of these relics, but soon they'll start a feedback loop of rewards going back into access to future games.
Hey, Sports Spirit, I haven't shared this with you yet, and I haven't actually shared this with the wider Loot community, but Treppers and I have been working quietly on a choose-your-own-adventure bot experience for the Lootverse. So, step into the Lootverse, bounce around in a Discord native experience. And in my test bed version of it, which is barely an MVP, but it is working, one of the main story points is you run into a character who says, I need a key. I need a gold key of the Twins, or of Fury, or of Rage. I need one of these keys. Do you have one? And it actually has a connection point where people have been sending me the keys. Or maybe not me, but sending the keys to the game. So you can see it on the chain. I'll show you the actual demo later, but you can see it on chain if you look at transfers.
That sounds brilliant. And
maybe I built the first utility for the keys.
Well, there you go, and that's the first example of we built a composable game asset rather than something that just belongs to the Crypt. It's there now in the open for others to build with, like Loot was. Cool. Yeah, I'd love to hear more of that.
Amazing.
So that's the relics at the moment. The ones that were this collection is actually in the contract is sort of predetermined 42,000 of these relics. There's only 672 have been won, and so there's plenty more to distribute over future games and also future competitions. And the ones that the gold material out of the chapter 1 is just one of the materials, and the objects that came out, the golden skulls, are the rarest, and the crowns the next rarest, and followed by medals and keys. But they're all, in terms of the whole collection, all at the rare end. So this table here shows the relic objects in order of rarity. And so the keys, which were the least rare from chapter 1, is only 2,600 of those in the collection of 42,000. So not only are they from chapter 1, and that's kind of marked on them as kind of sort of OG mark, they're rare in themselves. And this rarity is something we can play with as we distribute more. It kind of leads on to the competition. We've been running a backstory competition for people to write the origin story of the fire relics, and the winner of that we're going to allow to mint the fire crown. But the competition backstory needs to have a title of the provenance, and so the provenance of the relics from the Crypt. If we look at one of these, they've got the Crypt chapter 1 as their provenance, and in this competition, the winner of the competition decides the provenance of these fire relics. So one of the shortlisted entries, the provenance is the Forge of Amazon. So if that's voted as the winner, then that will be the provenance for at least a bunch of these fire relics, and the shortlisters get fire gems, which are less rare, but there's more to go around. And yeah, sort of hot off the press, we've got these are the 10 potential provenances of the fire relics. We'll be tweeting a Twitter poll. So all of these are linked to a backstory. So people have gone into huge lengths writing whole scripts of dialogue as to what happened to form these relics and why they were lost. And these are the 10 shortlisted entries for the possible provenance. So yeah, look out for that tomorrow. Please go and vote, and we'll see those stamped in the next set of relic NFTs. And then after that is chapter 2. We're still working out what that will be. We've promised that more loot will be involved, so that's going to be a big part of that. But we're looking at potentially releasing a new version of the game every month. So there's plenty of time for all the ideas. So there you go. That's what I've got this week.
Could I see on your stats page, it's weird that you had a damage statistics? Like, I'm curious to know who dealt the most damage, for example. Did you have that?
Yeah, one sec.
I saw that on the left-hand side of that chart, yeah.
So, I can't tell you who that is, but actually, so that's on the right-hand side here, isn't it? So, that's 16 raids was the most raids by any individual. Damage dealt, the most damage dealt by an individual was 101 hit points across all dungeons. And I think the most damage done by a single raid was 13 hit points.
Wow. 13, that's a solid. I mean, with 8 items.
Yeah.
It's 1.5, just about 1.5 per option.
Yeah. And I need to spend more time digging into it. It'd be great to go and see that raid. I mean, each of those raids will tell its story. I don't know if that 13 hit points was backed up by the big hitters, and it'd be interesting to know what. I think the records, the fastest dungeon was 7 raids. I think. Well, there's. Oh, there we go. Yeah, the Dungeon of Power just took just 7 bags.
That 9. Yeah, that 9 damage is strong.
2 9s in there, but that doesn't contain the 13. Yeah, I
think there's some stories in here for sure. If somebody, especially on your team, was able to break this down and look at the sequence of attacks. Yeah, there's definitely a story in every one of these raids.
And there's opportunity to surface that on as part of the game as well. Like it'd be great. You could have an animated playback of loot characters.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually raiding that dungeon, even though it's happened, you can see it play out.
Yeah. I know I definitely had a good time playing, so yeah, great launch, and looking forward to that chapter 2.
Excellent. I hope you have some more loot ready.
Yeah, plus I think I have, hopefully Tim Shell stays part of my raiding party, and we went through a more minting phase for a while, so I know there's a bunch.
Yeah, the Ethereum miners thanked me for all those gas fees.
Oh, we I had stats on the gas fees that buffed the raid and claim as well.
Oh, no, don't show us that.
They're as low as they could go, I think.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. I was glad to see it wasn't out of control when you got home.
Well, awesome. Sportsbeard, thank you for sharing. My vote's for Dust of Astral. And maybe not the Human Flesh Crown. I don't know about that one.
Yeah. I don't know. We can't really go engineering voting, so Human Flesh might win. You know.
Awesome. Well, that's all we have for agenda today. Does anyone have anything to share or any questions for Sportsbeard, for Jason and Michael, or anyone else?
I've got one small thing to share. Let me share a screen here real quick. This is not for Jason or Michael or Sportsbeard, but again, like I said, kudos to you guys. Pretty amazing to see it. You guys know I've been working on Loot.Foundation for a while, just kind of teasing it, playing with it, just adding as we go. A couple days ago, I went onto an editing spree and updated the site to make it as clean as possible and as easy and understandable as possible. And wanted to share it that it exists, reshare the link, point to it again, and just do a quick flash of it. If you remember, if you haven't seen this, Loot.Foundation is what I'm calling a canonical guidebook for the Lootverse. The idea being that for builders, for storytellers, for developers, designers, artists, writers, whoever, who want to join the Lootverse and work towards building this sort of cohesive yet still infinitely expansive universe together, what we have here is documentation of the core principles from the original Loot contract, some sort of meta timelines, and even some community canon and foundational lore that's starting to emerge. So none of the content here is per se that new, but the organization of it is hopefully cleaner. The way that it just fits together is hopefully a bit cleaner.
Tim, all we can see is your Discord.
Oh, damn. Okay, hold on. Feel free to always interrupt me. Share your screen. Boom, there we go. So I'm not going to say that again, but you get the concept. This is a canonical guidebook for the Lootverse. I just cleaned up the site so it's easier for people to jump into and make sense of. And this is really for all of us. What I'm trying to do here is create a place that people can go to just make sense of the Lootverse, to understand what what the canonical sort of foundational building blocks and principles of Loot are, so that we can permissionlessly go build this cohesive but still like infinitely expansive universe. And you've heard me say that phrase a lot, and I just want to tease those two words apart. When I talk about a infinitely expansive yet still cohesive universe, I'm not saying one single narrative with, you know, A to B to C to D to E to F in a linear way. It still has tons of space for parallel stories, parallel interpretations, parallel tracks, infinite stories, big and small. But my feeling here, and this is me because I'm an organizer and I like structure, as you guys know well here, my feeling is that if you have a unified foundation, if, you've heard me say this before too, but if you know that Superman has a relationship with Kryptonite, and you know that the X-Men are mutants, and you know that in Star Wars the Force is dark and light, and you know just like the foundational physics and the foundational principles, it's much easier to build a cohesive universe that doesn't just feel like a party game of people just saying random things that have to do with fantasy ideas, but that is weaved together into maybe not a cohesive narrative, but a cohesive universe. So what you have here is a presentation of those shared physics, a presentation of kind of the core principles, a presentation of the classes and the orders and the timeline and the item rankings and some of the core stuff that comes from the contract, but also stuff that we as a community have started to come together to decide is canon, is community canon, is foundational lore, stuff like the meta timeline, just to organize it in a place so that people can dive in here, make sense of it, understand this universe, and then dive in and build alongside with us. So feel free to check it out, Loot.Foundation. Like everything with Loot, this is not official. This is just my interpretation of the world and a gift that I wanted to make to the community here. Put a couple late nights, maybe almost all-nighters into this to try to just make this as clean and good as possible. But I feel pretty good about where it's at. The deeper you get, the more Loot geeky it gets. So you can dive in from here and it starts to explain the foundational principles. It breaks out the like canonical principles from the contract, the meta timeline. And I actually took the initiative to write kind of my own canonical interpretation of the story of Loot here, which is also to me sort of an invitation for others to do the same. This is almost like a recipe to say, like, what is the canon of Loot? Well, let's answer questions like, what is Loot in your canon? What's an adventure in your canon? Who are we as the players in your canon? What are the timelines and what's the fundamental concepts in your canon? And so if you really want to dive in, I put a bunch of thought into this, and this is my view of like a cohesive, not narrative, but a cohesive scaffolding for the Lootverse that we can hang tons of stories off of, tons of games, tons of mechanics, tons of collaborative media, multimedia, but done in a way where it's sort of collectively consistent and doesn't contradict itself, but also makes space for sort of parallel interpretations of the Lootverse canon. So if other folks have their own sort of, if you read this and you go, I see things a little differently, I mean, A, we can like comment on the canon and edit it, and I'm open-minded to changing my mind on some stuff. But also B, if you're like, man, I see a completely different interpretation of the Lootverse, this is an invitation to say, you know what, why don't we add it? Why don't you write your own canon, and let's add it to a page. I have a page here waiting for it. Where's my link here? We're calling it the Lore Development Kit, and it can be like multiple interpretations, multiple sets of facts and stories, but the goal is to have each of these canons be internally consistent, each of these canons to be cohesive and comprehensive. So I've taken the first stab at writing one that's like my cohesive and comprehensive interpretation of the Lootverse and how it fits together. Don't take this again as official. It's just my view on it. But it's also an invitation for other folks to do something similar. And then across here, we've got still the character classes and the explanations of the character classes from the original contract. We've got the orders and the explanations of the orders. We've got the timeline, like the explanation of how Loot and M-Loot and everything else fits together. And even some of the item ranking type stuff, like this. Item rankings here. of item rankings of the weapons, of the chests, of the feet, etc., etc. So, like I said, this gets pretty deep, pretty geeky. But if you're on this call, you're probably a loot geek like I am, and hopefully this is helpful. Any reactions or comments on that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty amazing. As someone who's like pretty new to the Loot-Verse, and has before been like observing it from afar, I find that there's this like kind of like key balance between like onboarding someone who's brand new and like giving them the foundation, but then also like inspiring that like all the emergent possibilities that can come out of it. So this seems to be like really striking that balance quite wonderfully. So I'm really excited to check it out.
Looks great, Tim Shaw.
Yeah,
I'm not a web designer or a web developer, but I do my best. Sorry, was somebody jumping in?
Oh, that was just me just saying that, yeah, I've already talked to you about this, but yeah, I think this is a great balance of, like the Glossier, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but like you were saying, just providing some structure to people that are new and want to learn how other people are thinking about Loot, but then also providing the freedom for people to invent their own interpretations. It just could get us out of the deadlock of everyone trying to ask for permission to define Loot. Like you can just make your own sandbox, and within that world, you can make all the rules. And if people want to build on top of that, then they can. But the builders can really choose which canon they want to utilize for their games or lore.
Yeah, thanks, man. And this is a lot of inspiration for you too. Even calling this Tim Shell's canon, that felt a little weird putting my name in here, but I did it on purpose because that was my way of saying like, hey, look, this is just one interpretation. I didn't want to call it like the first interpretation of the Loot-Verse or something, but in reality, this is Tim Shell's, my synthesis of a ton of work that Locket and Onusel and Loot Hero and Peter Watts and Anoncat and Andrew and Conway, obviously, and many other people have sort of thought deeply. Jane Number's another one, have thought deeply about the meaning of loot and the meaning of the contract and the meaning of how things fit together, both technically but also sort of conceptually, given the technical backdrop, what that means for what loot is, what that means for what an adventure is, what that means for who we are, what it means for how items evolve in the games or in the stories to come. And so this is a synthesis of a lot of that. Doesn't mean it's right, but it is a synthesis of a lot of that, and I've done my best to make it sort of collectively cohesive and as comprehensive as possible. So I should probably put a note in here that says, like, this is a synthesis from all those people. I'm not trying to take credit for it. What I'm actually trying to do here is what Loot Hero said, show the way, and show a way through the permissionless paralysis of nobody being able to do anything because it's permissionless, to be able to pull it and say, you know what, we can take action with respect to sort of the core loot canon and the loot foundational principles and building on top of it, and let's do it like this. Let's create these recipes of canon. Maybe there'll be multiple canons, but maybe Dom himself will come one day and say, hey, this is the Dom canon, this is the way I see the world. And I think that'd be beautiful to have these sort of branching, parallel, interconnected, but ideally not completely contradictory canons, which is why having that sort of foundational baseline is key to everything.
That's great. Just wanted to ask Tim Shaw, can you navigate from the front to your canon again? I've just been trying to do that live myself.
Well, you can't navigate from the Loot website to this stuff yet, though we maybe should. I mean, if everyone wanted to, we could put a top nav on here that's like canon or Loot Foundation or something like that. I don't know exactly, but the website's its own funny permissionless paralysis situation. But from the website to that canon stuff I was talking about, from the middle is the section that says Community Canon and Foundational Lore with a Tim Shell's Canon button here. But then also, if you click Start Here, there's 3 things you can do. Look at the canonical principles, look at the meta timeline, or dive into this first story of Loot. I got a lot of energy by making this, so thanks for the positive reaction. And actually, sorry, go ahead.
That title page image looks incredible. I want to read that. I can play that game like right now.
Yeah, I'm also not a Photoshop wizard, but I do my best. If there are any designers who want to help, though, I literally am not a designer at all. This is just me, like Frankensteining Notion stuff. But if somebody wants to help, I would love some help just beautifying this. The front page looks pretty good, but some of the sub pages obviously could use some work here. So yeah, if anyone wants to help, I am all ears.
If those are all the things you're not in This Is the Open, I want to know what you are.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing.
Thanks, guys. I'm a learner. That's what I tell my kids too.
All right, Tim Shaw, I think we're ready to wrap, maybe, unless anyone else has any. Actually, you know what? I do want to share. I don't see Jeremy on the call from Rings, but he made it a pretty big announcement this morning that Rings is now completely open source. So the Rings project and Jeremy have made all their 3D files, icons, smart contract, and website source code available on GitHub. And along with that, they wrote a post that kind of went on a deep dive into like how they built the project. The smart contract, artwork, deployment. And so they put that out there just as like as a resource for the community. Obviously like other games or projects can come in and use these 3D files or just use the icons. They built a pretty great website. And I think Jeremy's a very talented designer. So, go read that post just to read about like the design aspects of the project. I'll share that. Let's see. I'm going to share that in general. Share his post in general. And let's see. It's in there now. All right. Yeah. Anybody else have anything? Top of mind?
Yeah, I have a loot inspired thing. I think it's relevant. That's all right to share.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I shall share my screen. Okay. Can you see this? What do you guys see right now? Sorry,
it's loading.
Discord newbie. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I've been very much inspired by Loot for a long time now. Especially just kind of in investigating this thing. And it seems to be one of those moments in art history where a kind of new paradigm arrives, where there's not new content, but a brand new art form. The same way that all of a sudden you have a video game. The same way that you get video, right? And then the moment somebody kind of invents a controller, all of a sudden we have this a new medium that is the video game, or the same way that someone invents a motion picture camera, all of a sudden we have a brand new medium that is filmmaking. Is my thing still loading?
It's still loading.
Yeah.
It's totally distracting my capacity to articulate. Okay, I'm gonna try it one more time. If not, I might have to just save this for next week.
Yeah, that's okay
sorry,
too.
Y'all. Yeah, entire screen. Come on, let's go. Yeah. Wow, this is kind of embarrassing.
Gremlin strike.
Oh man, it's still loading.
That's fucking annoying. Okay. Yeah. I kind of actually need to be able to run through this while I talk, and otherwise I'm just going to sound like a lunatic. I shall wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
That's totally fine. We can put you on the end next week if and if you want to share it with me or Tim Shell beforehand too.
Yeah, beautiful. I'd love to do that.
Or you can share it in general even if you want.
Yeah, I think I'll do that too.
The general chat.
Thanks, y'all. Sorry about that.
It's all good. It happens. It happens. All right, and with that, let's end our shortest town square at 1 hour and 13 minutes. Thanks everybody for joining.
I think that's a beautifully infectious laugh to end on.
Exactly.
That one up. Take it away.